Hey, it's Silver, and this is Let's Build a Zoo. This is a game that I missed out on a while back, but had always kind of been looking at, never tried it, but have always looked at it for a while, wondering what it was like, and my initial assumption as to what exact kind of zoo sim this game was going to be was wrong, because I was expecting this to be a sort of laid-back, relatively casual, but very cute zoo sim that was more about, like, taking your time and enjoying your silly hybrid animals, but I kind of misunderstood the assignment, honestly, because as it turns out, this game has quite a lot of simulation depth underneath the hood, a lot more than I was expecting, and I would personally put this game within the realm of, like, the first two Zoo Tycoon games, as well as the first two Roller Coaster Tycoon games. That sort of level of simulation depth is kind of what we're talking about here, so there's actually a lot going on under the hood, and it's a lot more than just a silly, casual Zoo Tycoon sort of game. There's actually quite a bit to it, and I've had a lot of fun with it so far because it does a lot of things very differently in its own sort of unique way, and of course it has that focus on hybridizing animals, which we'll get into later, but that isn't the only cool thing about it. So you'll start off with just a simple single square on this big map of possible places to expand. It'll be pretty small, but you'll have access to a couple of basic amenities at first. Things like the ability to place restrooms and paths, a couple of basic vending machines, and of course the enclosures themselves. You'll only start with a couple of different types of enclosures, but there's a very extensive research tree in this game that you'll gain access to very early on that has a whole bunch of other types of enclosures as well. And of course the enclosures matter a lot because they determine what kinds of animals you can actually put in them in the first place. So you'll have your basics like grass, which will serve you very well for a long time because there are lots and lots of animals that fit in a grass enclosure. You also have a desert for some more reptilian creatures and stuff like that at first, and a savanna enclosure that you won't be able to use for a little bit until you start to run into stuff like hyenas and some other sort of earlier starter animals that will benefit from that type of enclosure. But oh right, and there's also the concrete enclosure that you definitely won't be using for a little while, but it is there. And eventually you can get stuff like Arctic enclosures and some other more advanced things like that for your more exotic animals. So there's actually quite a lot of depth already when it comes to the enclosures because you have to kit them out individually. You have to draw exactly what shape you want them to be. Of course, the amount of space they have in them matters a lot because that determines how many animals of different kinds you can actually put in there. Different animals obviously take up different amounts of space. So if you've got like snakes, for instance, you can have a whole bunch of those in a relatively small enclosure because they take up such a small amount of space. They won't be hurting for wanting more space for quite a while, but if you've got some like bears or something like that, they take up way more space, and you're going to have a much larger enclosure for them to roam around in, so you got to dedicate more of your park to actually including them. Once you've got your enclosure set up, you have to actually populate it with stuff. And I was impressed with how detailed this part actually is because you can basically customize every single tile of every enclosure that you draw and make it exactly how you want. So you have your obvious stuff like decorations. These will just improve the look of it for you and for the guests because a better decorated enclosure and surroundings will increase your park rating, attracting more guests and further giving value to your ticket price and stuff like that. So that's always good to keep them nice and decorated. But you've also got the more obvious stuff that you need, like water dishes and enrichment, stuff like bouncy balls, trampolines. The animals will actually use trampolines and some other silly stuff like that. The enrichment's actually pretty funny because a lot of them are not really real-life enrichment options for the most part, but are really funny to watch, and I approve of seeing snakes jump up and down on trampolines and mess around in piles of leaves and stuff. That's pretty great. Of course, you'll also eventually be able to research more advanced stuff to put in these, like, for instance, shelters. Shelters take up a lot of extra space in an enclosure, but they also extend the animal's life expectancy by just keeping them safe and giving them a place to sleep and things like that, I assume is kind of the concept behind it. But yeah, shelters are a good thing to have when you can. And you also have to make sure to lay out the enclosure in a efficient way because you have to have a zookeeper that actually comes in and cleans it, fills up the water, gives them food, and scrubs everything and all that stuff. So you need everything to be reachable by your zookeepers to make sure they can actually keep it clean and keep it stocked with food and water and all that. And the game will actually warn you if you place stuff in an inefficient way. It'll tell you, hey, there's like some blockages in this enclosure. It's taking a lot longer than it should to actually maintain it. And you've got to make sure to keep all of your enclosures up and running nicely because, of course, one inefficient enclosure is just sort of a little bit annoying. But, once you've gotten like 6 or 7 zookeepers across like 30 enclosures, then it starts to really become a problem if they can't get in and out of them efficiently. But in addition to all the various enclosures and the animals kept therein, you also, of course, have to populate it with other stuff that people need. Things like restrooms. You can actually have an entire subway system that allows guests and also your own staff easy way to get across larger sections of the map faster, which is really important, especially for your zookeepers to be able to get to various different enclosures efficiently. You want to have a good subway system to make sure that no pen is going without cleaning or without food for very long while they walk across a really long distance or anything like that. But of course, you'll also need food and drink because the guests will want that eventually, and you'll start out with some basic vending machines, and of course you'll be able to research more vending machines later that often are able to charge more for more advanced goods like chocolate bars and things like that. But you can get various different restaurants and stuff as well, slushy stands, ice cream stands, hot dog stands, pizza shops, all kinds of things like that, and you can place them all around your map in order to get people attracted to different parts of the zoo, as well as make sure that there's enough of like a spread of stuff that they don't have to walk a long distance to find what they want, because of course, guests are very fickle in games like this, and you got to make sure they have easy access to trash cans, to restrooms, to transportation, to food and drink, and all those other amenities and things to keep everyone happy and keep everyone coming back. And of course, the happier you keep everyone and the more decorated your park is, the more you can charge for tickets and the more money you can make every day to keep your zoo up and running. There's also quite a bit of almost like roller coaster tycoon level detail when it comes to managing your shops and stuff, which I really like. You can determine exactly how much gift shops and restaurants and vending machines charge to actually be used. You can also determine the quality of the items in it, so that you can make a lower quality item that gives you more profit, or make a higher quality item that keeps people happier but gives you less profit. And you can also choose some sort of extra ingredient that has various effects. Like for instance, you can choose how much caffeine is in your Coke machines in order to give people bursts of energy to get them around the park faster and just have them there longer, but it of course also makes them thirstier over time. And you can choose, like, say, the amount of salt on your pretzels that'll make people a lot thirstier as well, but it'll keep them, of course, buying stuff from your drink machines as well. So you got to kind of balance it out to keep your zoo running nicely and efficiently, and also to keep people happy enough to be willing to pay to come back. Another place where there's a good amount of depth is in your staff. You have to actually hire your staff for every individual position. You have to basically put up an ad and then wait, and it costs a certain amount of money each day to keep this campaign going, depending on exactly how you're doing it. If you post it on like social media and stuff like that, then it costs more, but of course you get more applicants faster as well. And then you can simply review any applicants you have at any time and decide to hire any number of them you want, and then close the position. And you can also adjust each individual employee's salary, which will of course determine their happiness and their efficiency. You can give them bonuses and some other stuff like that. And you've got to hire things like keepers, janitors, vets, crematory operators, basically animal undertakers, geneticists. And at the end of every week, all of your expenses will come out. So you will have to pay on any loans you've taken, as well as pay all of your employees' salaries all at once. So you've got to make sure to end Sunday with a pretty good amount of money so that you can actually afford to start a new week. And you can also buy extra land as well. The overall game map is actually huge. There's a tremendous amount of space that you can use, and of course every time you buy more space you get a whole large square, and then the price of buying an additional space goes up. It tends to roughly double each time, so it does get very expensive very quickly, but it is also invaluable to have all this extra space because, hey, zoos take up a lot of space. Zoo parks have a lot of big enclosures and stuff like that, so you're going to actually need the space. And you have quite a good number of tools as well, by the way, to actually decorate your park with. Aside from just the simple decorations like rocks and trees and flowers and stuff, you also have a bunch of different types of paths, and you can draw them however you want, whenever you want, which is really nice. You have like full freedom when it comes to tile by tile placement of stuff like paths. You've also got, of course, like lamps and trash cans and benches and chairs and tables and all sorts of things like that. So you can really make your park look exactly how you want it to, which I appreciate how much depth there is in the actual park building in this game. I didn't necessarily expect there to be quite this much, right? I didn't expect the simulation to be quite this involved, and I was really impressed by how much stuff there is happening under the hood, aside from just looking at adorable animals. You can go to shelters and actually purchase animals for any of your enclosures that are available that week. You can also trade other zoos. This is one of the biggest sources of new animals for you. Oftentimes, animals will be tradable to other zoos, and they'll give you 2 or 3 animals in exchange for whatever they want. And this is, like I said, often how you get new stuff. So you might have like a black and pink spotted pig, and then one of the zoos near you is trading 2 porcupines. So you can just give them one of your pigoos, trade them some porcupines, and there you go. Set them up in their new enclosure, and you have some new animals. There's actually quite a significant amount of like genetic depth to this game as well, because as is pretty famous in their marketing, you can hybridize animals. You can in fact pretty much hybridize any two animals you want once you unlock the CRISPR station. You can make stuff that almost kind of makes sense, like a goose-duck hybrid, or you can just go totally off the walls and make like a porcupine elephant or whatever you want. So you can pretty much do just totally ridiculous stuff with this thing, and it's definitely the best part of the game is seeing what kind of nonsense you can actually create and exactly how you're going to take care of it. And the way that it works is you have to actually breed animals in your zoo at first to unlock different genetic variants of those animals. So like I said, you might have a pink pig, and then like a pink and black spotted pig, and then a totally jet black pig, and some other stuff like that. And as you keep breeding different kinds of pigs to each other, you'll unlock more and more of their genetic variants. And once you unlock a certain amount of their genome, you can then use that genome in your CRISPR machine to hybridize them with other animals. So you're encouraged to have like a really strong breeding program in your zoo in order to get as much genetic diversity as possible, so you can unlock more animal types for hybridizing. And there's even a nursery that you can get, which is a really nice feature that allows you to take any two of the same animal, of course, from your zoo and actually breed them together if they're a match. And you can use this to control what kinds of variants you're getting easier, because of course they will breed in the zoo just by being there, as long as you don't have any contraception active, which you can do and will need sometimes, especially for animals like rabbits for obvious reasons. But once you have several different more exotic variants, you might want to start breeding them together and making sure they're not breeding with any of the other animals, so that you can produce even more exotic variants and continue unlocking more of the genome. So that's where the nurseries come in, allowing you to selectively choose two animals of a group to actually breed together to make sure you have a better likelihood of new results. And also, it takes a couple of extra days to use the nursery, but the animal is nursed throughout the whole nursery campaign thing that you go on, which means that it's a lot more likely to survive. So the baby actually comes out much healthier than if you let them sort of be born wild, as it were. And then, of course, during all this, you have all sorts of different missions from various people that are happening. Stuff like donations to specific causes, making sure to get a certain number of guests in a day, or making sure to sell a certain number of things in a day. There are all kinds of different missions that pop up. Different NPCs have different sort of genres of missions for you, and you go along a sort of campaign track as you complete mission after mission, and you reach new thresholds and unlock even more missions, and that's sort of the way the campaign in this game works. There's also a sandbox mode if you just want to mess around and make the biggest, most ridiculous park you can, but it's definitely cool that there is a pretty structured, quite long campaign that even allows you to do stuff like purchasing and managing multiple zoos at once. And there's even all sorts of like utility management, like how much power you're buying versus being able to generate power with like wind turbines, how much water you're buying versus storing it in a water tower. You can even have farms and hire farmers to actually grow the feed and other stuff for your animals, because you have to individually buy feed for all of your animals, as well as determine exactly what kinds of stuff you're feeding them, because there's less expensive, less nutritious stuff, and then there's a spectrum of higher priced, higher nutrition stuff, and you can mix them in a percentage based sort of basis, like 1% at a time, of exactly how much of each kind of feed you want them to have, so you can determine what their various nutritional values are, as well as how much you're spending on each of them to keep them on that diet, which is again a really surprising bit of depth that I didn't necessarily expect the game to have. But I'm really only just scratching the surface with this explanation, because there's a lot more to it, and it will continue to get more and more complex as you expand the research tree and unlock more and more stuff. You'll get the ability to unlock surveillance, and you'll get the ability to unlock like a crematorium to actually deal with bodies and things, which of course you will have eventually. You'll be able to deal with different VIP visitors, and of course you'll have moral choices to make. There's actually a morality system where you can make evil or good choices to get evil or good points, and as those points build up, they unlock more evil or good options on the research tree, allowing you access to some exclusive buildings and technologies to that morality, so that's pretty cool as well. This means that you have to play at least twice to sort of see everything, which is neat, and there's definitely a lot to see. I'm a big fan of the animal hybridization system. I think it's really funny to be able to create like horrifying abominations in your zoo and set them loose, so I'm a big fan. And on top of all this, there's also, of course, a Dinosaur Island DLC that adds a bunch of new features, a bunch of new enclosure types, and of course many different dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals. And yes, you can hybridize those animals with other normal animals as well, so you could have the saber-toothed capybara if you want to. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that DLC at the moment, so I can't show you, but it is apparently quite good, and it does look like a good amount of fun, so that's cool to have available. And yeah, overall, I'm really glad I went back to take a look at Let's Build a Zoo, because it would have been a shame to completely miss out on this. I've always been a fan, since I was a kid, of Tycoon-style games, and this is a really solid entry into that sort of genre that I think people should be aware of. So that is Let's Build a Zoo. I will, of course, link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page. It continues to get updates and sees plenty of support post-release, even up to now, so that's awesome to see. Thank you guys very much for watching. Do please check it out if you're at all interested, and I'll see you guys next time.